Hi, I'm Jackie Knowles of Glasswork Pixie, partnering with Oceanside Glass and Tile to bring you this instructional Fusing Fundamentals video series. Today in Lesson 4, I'll demonstrate best practices for constructing fusing projects in ways that produce predictable results. And I'll show you how to tweak your design setup to achieve different aesthetics. As glass is heated, it becomes viscous and begins to flow under the impacts of gravity and surface tension. The direction and degree to which it flows depend upon its original thickness and the intensity of the heat. When fired, glass will always seek a thickness of around 6 millimeters, which is about a 1/4 inch and is also equivalent to 2 layers of standard thickness glass. This is sometimes referred to as the 6 millimeter rule. This means that when pieces thinner than 6 millimeters are heated, their perimeter pulls inward, causing the edges and corners to thicken while thinning out the center. Conversely, when pieces thicker than 6 millimeters are heated, their perimeter pushes outward, causing the edges to taper out and become thinner than the center. These principles of viscosity and flow are easily observed when comparing how 3 millimeter, 6 millimeter, and 9 millimeter stacks of glass change shape and thickness before and after firing. Whether becoming thicker or thinner, the edges will also always become more rounded as the glass tends toward a more circular shape. Any fusible glass fired for hot enough and long enough will eventually conform to a 6 millimeter thick circle, as you can test for yourself by bringing small scraps to full fuse levels. You can also manipulate the shape and thickness of glass by constraining its outward flow using things like kiln dams, casting molds, and fiber paper. Kiln dams can be placed against the edges of glass to restrain it. Casting molds come in specific shapes that frit can be poured into. Layers of fiber paper can be cut into custom shapes and then stacked as high as needed. You can take advantage of glass's predictable tendencies to create interesting looks and textures in your fused art. But changes in thickness can be frustrating for beginners that would rather not have to worry about accounting for these differences. If you want your project to maintain nearly the same size and shape before and after firing, make it with a consistent total thickness of 6 millimeters. This way, the glass will not flow significantly inward or outward since it's already at the thickness it naturally equalizes toward. Because most Oceanside compatible glass sheets are about 3 millimeters thick, it's easy to use them to construct 2-layer projects that maintain an even thickness of around 6 millimeters before and after firing. In addition to controlling for volume within your designs, you'll also need to control for bubble formation. Very small bubbles are often unavoidable when fusing, but large ones can be unsightly and can distort your pieces. Bubbles form when air becomes trapped either between glass and the kiln shelf or between layers of glass. Since hot air rises, these air pockets shift glass upward during firing, resulting in pieces with either clear bubbles or small bumps visible on their surface. If fired to high enough temperatures, they can even burst through the glass, leaving a hole in the finished piece. This can also be the result of moisture left on an improperly dried kiln shelf, which creates air bubbles as it evaporates. If controlled, bubbles can be an interesting design feature, but if not, they can be an unpleasant blemish. When constructing a design, you can avoid bubbles by incorporating pathways by which air can escape. This means that instead of firing 2 solid layers of glass together, ensure one of the layers includes several cuts that route air to the outer edges. You'll also want to avoid accidentally trapping air bubbles via textured glass. Don't fire these types of glasses between other layers or face down on the kiln shelf. Instead, ensure any textured glasses are always the topmost layer of your design, with the textured side facing upward. We'll discuss specific shelf prep strategies in Lesson 7, but be aware now that constructing designs on top of shelf paper provides a gas-permeable layer that can also help direct air out from under a project. Incorporating a bubble squeeze into your firing schedule is another method of reducing unwanted air pockets. When glass is heated rapidly, its outer edges will soften before its interior does. This means that the outer edges of the top layer of a multi-layer project will fuse down onto the layer below before the center, trapping air in between the two layers. A bubble squeeze slows the initial heating of the glass in order to give the upper layers enough time to evenly settle down onto the lower ones, thus allowing air to escape laterally from between the layers. To add a bubble squeeze to your firing schedule, modify the initial heat and initial heat soak phase to increase the temperature at a very slow rate, with several intermittent holds along the way. And then progress with the rapid heat and process soak and following phases as usual. The exact rates, temperatures, and amount of segments of your bubble squeeze will depend on your specific project and the glass it's constructed with. But if you're working with Oceanside compatible products, you can use their advanced 8-segment full fuse profile schedule as a starting point. In these examples, this one was fired with a bubble squeeze, resulting in a relatively smooth, bubble-free surface, while this one was fired without a bubble squeeze, resulting in a large amount of trapped air and lots of unsightly bumps and bubbles. Once you have a design constructed, you'll have to decide whether you want to fire it face up or face down within the kiln. Face up positioning leaves the design exposed and results in soft seams with slight organic curves where glass segments meet. Face down positioning covers the design by either placing it flat against the kiln shelf or placing a transparent layer over top, and results in crisp seams and sharp lines between glass segments. These different positioning styles can impart the same pattern with an entirely different mood or tone. To position a design face up, make it the topmost layer within the kiln. For a project made with 2 layers of 3mm glass, this would mean first placing a base layer, such as an uncut piece of clear glass, followed by the design layer placed on top. Firing this way allows the glass segments on top to pull apart slightly, creating soft outlines. To position a design face down, make it the bottommost layer within the kiln. For a project made with 2 layers of 3mm glass, this would mean first placing the design layer, and then adding a second layer on top, such as an uncut piece of clear glass. Firing with an uncut top layer like this prevents the glass in the lower layer from pulling apart, keeping the outlines rigid and sharp on both sides of the piece. Finally, when constructing a project, make sure it's sized to fit not only on your kiln shelf, but also within any fusing molds you plan to use later on. We'll discuss the details of slumping, draping, and casting in Lesson 8, but it's important to realize at this stage that the size of a project is limited by the size of the mold. Especially with slumping, the outer perimeter of a project typically can't be larger than that of the mold. So understand the size limitations of your tools and materials up front, and only build pieces that they can accommodate. Now that you're able to construct designs that have a consistent thickness, are bubble-free, and have either soft or hard lines depending on your preference, you can be sure that the pieces you fire will come out of the kiln looking way better than when they went in. Join me for Lesson 5, where I'll show you how to build upon these basic design principles by adding in all sorts of fun accessory glasses.